All right, my lovelies, welcome back to Bird's Eye View, the podcast where this Essex bird takes you high enough to see the big picture, but low enough to spot all the juicy worms underneath. I'm Lois Perry, brash, brainy, and not afraid to ruffle a few feathers. Now, they say Essex girls only talk about fake tan and nails, but I talk about absolutely everything and the stuff that the mainstream won't touch. Speaking of naughty, look who's flown into the nest today. The brilliant historian Dr David Starkey, never one to keep his beak shut, and the ever outspoken Dan Wootton, who's trending on Twitter as we speak. So pour yourself a cuppa, because this is a bird's eye view. We're soaring straight into the thick of it, Essex style. Sharper heels, sharper content, everything is just absolutely fantastic. And I am so excited to have one of my... I'm going to take this hat off, actually.
You look better. We can actually
I've ruined my hair
see
now.
more. You know, the Essex girl wants to be seen, for God's sake.
Yeah, no.
You looked exactly like a female Marlon Brando. Make of that what you wish.
Well, I think there's no bigger compliment, actually.
You should have ridden in on a motorbike with that at the back. Yeah.
Was he in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof? Yeah, he was absolutely gorgeous in that. I digress. Thank you so much for joining me, Dr.
A pleasure.
Starkey. You know that I've been a fan of yours, well, since forever, basically. So having
embryonic, an embryonic Essex girl fan.
Literally. So today we're going to talk about quite a few things, but the thing that I'd like to talk about first is this free speech issue, because free speech is completely under threat. It's not just under threat. We've lost free speech, haven't we? What's going on?
To say we've lost it is going too far. Okay. It's also really important to understand we never had it.
Okay.
Why is that? Well, in a full sense of the word, that there were always very considerable limitations on what you could say. There were religious limitations. The law of blasphemy, which is fought over in my lifetime. It's fought over. The last cases are famous ones in the 1960s and 70s.
I thought the blasphemy law was abolished. It never.
It hasn't. It has now been repealed. But right. Mary Whitehouse, the famous case of gay news of the scene of the gay lovers on the cross. Can you imagine it?
Oh,
the ultimate blasphemy for Christians.
So what? Tell me about it. I don't know.
And that's the last case. Okay. Mary Whitehouse was the famous morality campaigner of the time.
That's right.
And now, of course, she is beginning to look as though the old girl might have had something in
it.
We all laughed her to pieces, but she warned on pornography and its destructive effects. She warned on the effects of horror violence and the cheapening of the sanctity of life, the normalization of extreme behaviour and so on. So there may be something in the old girl, but let's just get clear on this. So the actual law of Christian blasphemy is abolished very recently. Up to the time of my childhood, the 1950s, all plays were censored. The stage was censored.
The Lord Chamberlain?
By the Lord. This is the role of the Lord Chamberlain.
That's right.
And there were various forms of criminal libel, which were used very contentiously to silence political opponents. Now, that's the downside.
Okay.
The important thing to understand, on the other hand, is compared with everywhere else in Europe, on political matters, we enjoyed astonishing freedom of speech.
For how long?
Right through.
Right.
I would from the end of the civil wars, and it broadens in the course of the 18th century,
the 17th century. Yeah.
But with also, very importantly, moments when the establishment clamps down, with Wilkes and all the rest of it, the famous MP and so on. There's also, again, it's an important distinction to make. Whereas we were much freer in terms of political speech, in terms of sexual speech, continental Europe much more so. The French living up to being the French living up to being naughty, and so again, all sorts of novels that were regarded as being like Ulysses, indeed the Lady Chatterley's Lover's Case. Is when I'm a young man, if you remember, and a judge actually asking, was this an appropriate work for servants and young ladies to read? So you forget the astonishing change from the 1960s.
Yeah.
So what broadly happened in Britain from the 1960s was anything started to go.
Well, my granddad felt that everything collapsed when women were given the vote. But...
No, but that's another way. I've got very strong views on the female franchise, but I wouldn't dare recite them. Essex girls have got shoes and know how to use them.
Well,
so
absolutely. No, my granddad thought that women shouldn't have the vote, but apart from me, I was the only woman.
Yeah, but just let's pin this one
Sorry.
down. What you get then is an extraordinary opening up from the 1960s. But it's against a background, and this is something that I think we've really got to drive home. Whatever the formal limitations might have been, and incidentally, there's something also that needs to be said very clearly. The notion that America was different because of the First Amendment.
Is that wrong?
Some really interesting work has been done. Right through the 19th century in America, the limitations on freedom of speech were roughly the same as they are in Britain. The areas that I was talking about, public decency, blasphemy, all of this sort of thing. And it only really changes in America in the 1950s and the early 1960s with a group of very activist judges in the Supreme Court who interpret the First Amendment to mean what is now being talked about by Trump, being talked about particularly by J.D. Vance as free speech absolutism.
Because for Elvis, for example, they would only show him from the waist up.
Correct.
I'm not having seen the effect that a video had on my 13-year-old when my daughter was 13. I'm not surprised.
You see, that's a
she was fizzing.
That's a question of decency. That's a question of decency.
Yeah, absolutely.
And America, America had a very puritanical element.
Yeah, the religious stuff.
The whole Puritanism of New England, the moralism, a far more church-going society than even England was in the 1950s.
Yeah.
But anyway, returning to England, from the 1960s onwards, we experienced the laughing out of court, literally, of Mary Whitehouse, the complete abandonment of all forms of censorship, the increasing relaxation of the BBC, again, the great moment for me as a sixth former. We are now talking 1963. I can't
believe you're 80 years old, Dr. Starkey.
I am so ancient. That was the week that was. That was the programme that made the reputation of Germaine Greer, Clive James, all the lot of them. And I was a sixth former. We put on our own satirical review, tearing to pieces all the bloody sports lads in the school. It was the intellectuals' revenge after having been treated by contempt by these awful rugger buggers.
What's a rugger bugger?
I'll explain to you later when we're off air. But so there was this extraordinary opening up. And then there is a remarkable closing down.
And when does that happen?
One half of it is contemporaneous. It begins 1968 with the response to Enoch Powell. And what you get from that point onwards, and I call it the beginning of the great lie.
Okay.
The beginning of the noble lie. The noble lie that multiculturalism is an unadulterated good, that diversity isn't something absolutely to be welcomed, that it has no downside, and that any criticism of it is wicked and racist and to be suppressed.
So that's why it was brought in.
That I think from that moment onwards, and I think this is the moment at which we finish up with the kind of cases we're going to be talking about now. The British state takes the view, and again, it's great tragedy. We, in so many ways, were vastly better prepared to deal with a racially diverse society. We'd had the experience of the empire.
Absolutely.
Britain is not a nation state. There isn't a single British nation. We're Scots, we're Welsh, we're Irish, and we're English.
We're the United Kingdom.
And the United Kingdom. And in other words, you identified not with a particular... This is why flags play, until yesterday, flags play much less of a role than they say do in continental Europe.
And America.
And in America, and so on. So we were because we had this idea of two identities. We were binational. you're British abroad,
Yeah.
and you're Scots, Welsh, Irish, or whatever.
Yeah, we say British if somebody asks our nationality.
So it was British was an attribute of the state.
Okay.
Like British Rail, the horrors of all the horrors of nationalisation. British. It was I'm afraid it became a symbol of terrible quality. British Rail, British Leyland,
Well, if you
and all the
can't
rest
fire
of it.
people, the standards go down.
But the tragedy is that would have been an opportunity to have had a welcoming, which was a conditional welcoming.
Okay.
In which you was told, which was exactly the way in which it worked between England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales, we had a single set of dominant political and cultural values, which are essentially English. The core of the British state is the English state, which goes back 1,200 years. And there was, and what happened was the Celtic nations, intense cultural nationalisms, intense, in other words, kilts and folk music.
It's quite recent, that whole Scottish.
Well, the kilt is relatively recent, and you could argue really that vision of Scotland is invented by Sir Walter Scott, and is it 1821 or whenever it is? Yeah, Walter Scott. Scott is actually known as Scott Watery, invented invented for the visit of King George IV to Edinburgh, which is the moment at which Scottish cultural nationalism is endorsed by the monarchy. But we take a different view.
Yeah.
We take a view that no, we won't have this recognition of difference. What we will do instead is we will suppress dissent. I think it flows from that point forward.
No,
what I think is also very important in all these cases, we're going to be talking about.
Should I just give the viewers a little bit of context? So, talking about suppressing the wrong views. So there was a guy called Robert Moss. He's 55. He worked for the Staffordshire Fire Service. He was dismissed. We're not entirely sure why he was dismissed, but it's sort of irrelevant for this particular story. He was dismissed from the fire service, and he posted on a private Facebook group just some remarks about the service's management. The police turned up and arrested him. So it's an extraordinary overstretch. I mean, this, But fortunately, the Free Speech Union, which is headed up by Lord Young, now my friend Toby, have managed to get the ruling basically got it overturned. It's absolutely ridiculous.
It's preposterous, but I think there are lots of things we need to unpick. The first is that the act under which he's charged is 1988, long before the internet. So the Malicious Communications Act, it was designed to deal with things like poison pen letters. A world that's completely gone, where doing one of these things involved a highly deliberate act. In other words, something completely before the age of the tweet and the internet, when you knock them out in seconds.
Somebody writing a letter, putting it in an envelope, putting a stamp on the envelope.
Exactly. Completely different notion. So we've got an old law that has been deliberately repurposed for a new situation. And that's one of the reasons that again, you get this extraordinary disproportion between, I think it's last year, it's 12,000 people are arrested under the Act. 1 in 10 is convicted. Now, this is an extraordinary, obviously, injustice and waste of police time. I think the thing we need
They like doing it, the police, don't they?
They love doing it.
What
we should do is, we should again unpick this case a bit more. The big thing I would like to pull out from this is that the actual processes of arrest are now used to terrorise people. In other words, the fact that so few people are convicted doesn't actually stop this stuff acting as a very formidable deterrent to people exercising freedom of speech.
So it's the arrest in itself.
I mean, let's look at what happens to this man, because it's really worth going through this in detail. The raid is carried out at 7 o'clock in the morning. It would no doubt involve, we're not told whether they knocked his door down. If he hadn't been up and answered it, they would have knocked his door down.
I was arrested by the HMRC at 7 o'clock in the morning.
So this is the punitive use of powers of arrest.
Yeah.
Then you go on and you look at what else they do. They seize his phones, his iPad, and his computer.
So
in other
private.
words, you confiscate property. And nowadays, if you confiscate somebody's phone,
It's
his
everything.
iPad, it is your identity.
It's got your banking on it.
got everything.
It's got
In
all
other
the
words-
naughty things you may have watched online. It's
That's
got
right.
everything.
It is, in a sense, most of us live our lives online.
Yeah,
this
we
is
do, yeah.
this is deliberately seizing somebody's life without any legal process whatever.
No.
They are doing this without, I think, somebody may ring in and tell me I'm wrong, I think they're doing this without warrant.
Right.
They're doing it without any form of scrutiny.
No, you're absolutely
and
right.
then we need to go and look even more carefully about
Okay.
what was done. So we use the form of arrest punitively. We use the gathering of evidence, that's what they say they're doing, when they seize his internet equipment.
Let's remember, he's been arrested for a private Facebook post,
but the
not for being a paedophile or anything like that.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
But what they're doing, so you actually weaponize the business of arresting.
Yeah.
You then weaponize the search for evidence because you seize all his IT equipment. And then what you do else, you actually weaponize the process by which he's not put in jail. You weaponize remanding under conditions of bail. Because
Okay, so
what
you're
they do
controlling
is
his behaviour.
they in fact impose conditions on him that would have meant he was forbidden from talking about his arrest. In other words, he couldn't tell anybody
Stasi
he
behaviour.
couldn't tell anybody that he'd been arrested without being rearrested
That's
and put on
extraordinary.
remand.
It's
now,
extraordinary.
this seems to me to be something that is utterly fundamental. What you're actually doing is you were circumventing the whole process of trial and conviction
process,
because the police are using the powers that they are given because they are trusted in a fashion which shows they don't deserve to be trusted.
No, they don't.
And the other clear element of this case that I want to focus on, and it's characteristic of almost all of these cases, look at the two bodies involved. There is the police service in Staffordshire, and there is the fire and rescue service that he worked for.
Yeah.
It is perfectly clear that these two services were working in cahoots to protect each other. And what we are now seeing, Lois, and I think it's an absolutely fundamental thing, this term called the blob. The agencies of the state, the civil service, the academics, and the MPs. Do you know what? They all act as a kind of self-protective mechanism against us. And the thing that makes it so terrible, they have different values.
Well, completely.
This is why you need to use this machinery. And of course you could say, oh, well, this is an isolated case. But it's not.
It's not
It's why the
isolated.
Free Speech Union exists.
No, and good
By the
on
way,
Lord Young.
everybody watching this program,
Yeah.
by definition, I'm going to look at that camera.
Okay, look at the
Everybody
camera.
watching this program, by definition, is somebody who believes in freedom of speech and believes in freedom. Join the Free Speech Union.
Absolutely.
The thing that led to my own, I've been through this process, my cancellation back in the summer of 2020, the Free Speech Union was barely going at that point, and that was the reason that I was exposed to my enemies, the principal one of which, ladies and gentlemen, was Sir Keir Starmer. The person who suggested that for an admittedly incautious remark about damn blacks, which in circumstances I feel of the BLM protests, daubing Churchill's statue and threatening to topple others in that summer, was possibly an understatement.
Yeah.
For that statement, Sir Keir Starmer regarded and said so expressly as appropriate that I was charged under the Public Order Act.
It's absolutely disgraceful.
One section of which, Lois, is imprisonment for up to 6 years.
6 years?
Up to 6 years.
Christ.
Now, this is the complete disproportion.
If you did go to prison, though, I don't want you to go to prison, but if you did, I think that you probably end up teaching all of the inmates.
You.
No, but no. I don't want you to go to prison. Right, we've got to move on. We're going to go to a quick break. All right, thank you very much. Hi, welcome back. I'm here with Dr David Starkey, CBE, and
Just.
we'll
They tried to take it away.
did they? Oh, L4. Right, so what I'd like to talk about, the news this week. So we've got President Donald Trump and Zelensky met at the White House alongside European leaders, including the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. God,
Who was missing from all the photographs.
That's so embarrassing, isn't it? Do you find it embarrassing when you see...
Well, I mean, the embarrassment is limitless, isn't it? I mean, the worst thing is David Lammy sitting in the chair of Palmerston.
Oh,
you know, the measure of our national decline is a foreign secretary who thought that it was Marie Antoinette who discovered uranium and whatever. I mean, just rather than Marie Curie.
His mastermind was the
memorable.
worst ever.
It is the worst ever.
Yeah.
It's particularly, we're both Tudor fanatics. He was asked the question, who succeeded Henry VIII? And he said Henry VII, which means not only is he
not even a good guess.
Not only is he pig ignorant about history, but he can't count. So it means we've got both a foreign secretary and a chancellor of the exchequer who can't count. Anyway, we're supposed to be talking about the Ukraine.
We digress, but any excuse to go into Tudor history, I absolutely love.
Well, you see, Donald Trump is a modern Henry VIII. The key thing to understand about Donald Trump is he understands monarchy. He understands the idea of command. He understands the idea of doing something like this, signing a piece of paper, big, bold signature like that, holding it up to a camera.
You said it's almost like an emperor.
It's like a king. Or an emperor. I mean, it's why he was so interested in King Charles's signature, holding it up. And you know what? Something happens. And we are used to politicians who blether forever, pass resolution after resolution, and nothing happens.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in the case of foreign relations, you can't just press a button and things happen.
No.
As we saw very clearly. And Trump, again, this is where Trump conspicuously fell down. I will solve, if you remember.
You're right. He set himself up.
He set himself up to fail. But equally, I think it's important, that we all pull back and be a little bit rational about the Ukraine. Do you remember who first got us heavily involved in the Ukraine? Do you remember the moment?
It was Boris Johnson,
wasn't it? Boris Johnson. Yeah. It was that.
Why? Why did he? Why?
Because I think he was cosplaying Churchill. It was his Churchillian moment.
Okay.
It enabled him to strut. Which Boris, like most politicians, I mean, even
he pounced on me once. He invited me for lunch.
I really don't want to. really. Having seen a photograph of him more or less.
No, I didn't fancy him.
More or less naked on his holiday recently. The thought of being pounced would be the wrong word. It would flow. No,
I was in his study when he worked at when he was the editor of the Spectator. And suddenly he was like this.
It would like being assaulted by a blancmange, wouldn't it?
Do you know
that vague whiteness.
No,
a blancmange with a blonde wig.
He's certainly not my cup of tea.
Anyway,
I like geeky-looking Jewish men.
Anyway, let's go back to the Ukraine.
Yeah.
But it's a telling thing that it's Boris who launches this European idea that this is a war to defend Europe and a war to defend European values.
Yeah.
And this is a completely mad idea. What's going on in Europe and what's going on in the Ukraine is something completely different. It's a war, there's this wonderful new word, ethnogenesis. It's a war of the birth of a nation which may or may not survive. That's the Ukraine.
Well, we're going to bring Dan Wootton in now. He's going to join us briefly. Hi, Dan.
Oh, violence is a good introduction to Dan. Yes.
Hi, Dan. Are you there? Hi, darling. Oh my God! Thank you so much for coming on. I'm so chuffed. I really, really am. Totally chuffed. Totally chuffed. So, what do you think about this? The talks with Donald Trump and Dr. Starkey was just saying that in a way he set himself up to fail because he sort of bigged it all up that he could solve everything. And also we were just talking about Boris Johnson cosplaying Winston Churchill. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, firstly, I'm loving the Donald. I'm loving what he's done this week. And fundamentally, I'm sort of in that place where I just think that his showmanship and his forced negotiations will end up working. Maybe that's incredibly naive of me.
No, I agree, actually.
Jeffrey Starmer trying to cosplay as a statesman while burning our billions on this war that should never have happened. I feel, Lois, like I am just so out of even the right-wing mainstream fighting when it comes to this war.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Dr. Starkey would like to come in.
Dan, can I ask you, you just said there something that I rather agree with, a war that shouldn't have happened. And what I think is so interesting, I mean, what is your answer to why it shouldn't have happened? I mean, my answer is that this is not a war. My answer is this is not a war for European values. This is something completely different. It's a vicious national struggle between two Slavic peoples who are determined to assert their separate nationhoods, define frontiers, and it's fought by brutal, toxic masculinity. In other words, what Starmer...
I love a bit of toxic masculinity.
It's a war of toxic masculinity. and what Europe is doing is saying it's a war for European values. When in Europe, we resist the idea of defending frontiers. We resist the idea of blood and soil. We resist the idea of nationhood. We resist toxic masculinity. So there's a complete contradiction between what they're doing and what we say they're defending. And as for the idea that our boys should go and defend somebody else's right to nationhood when they're denied their own, it's simply mad.
You're right, they are denied their own.
Mad.
Yeah.
Dan, and hearing Starmer talk again this week about boots on the ground when we cannot defend our own southern border, I'm sorry, it infuriates me.
Agreed.
Maybe he could get some of his rough trade to...
Can you imagine the new gay regiment? I'm the general, and he's the and dear old Dan is the brigadier, and we have the three young lads bringing up the rear.
Well, quite so. Right, so okay, I'm going to change the subject really quickly. I'm going to change the subject. So, Dan, thank you so much for featuring me on your show last night. You showed the video of me going to the hotel in Southend. So yeah, I mean, it's so the Skylark Hotel is the hotel in Southend that's housing over 100 migrants. And these individuals, I can't say for certain, but it's highly likely, have been going down to the beach. They've been filming very young girls, including my daughter, actually, who's, she is stunning, but she's also 14, And so that obviously shouldn't be happening.
She's almost too old.
She is almost too old. I keep telling her, I said, if you don't behave yourself, I'm going to sell you for £1 million.
You've got to recoup costs.
Yeah, well, it's expensive bringing up children, But anyway.
The traditional method of doing it.
Actually, I found her a prince, actually. I have found her a prince, but she says she doesn't like him, but it's not up to her. Anyway, so we've got these migrants, and also the local taxi company gave me some insider information, and basically they are ferried to and from dental appointments, hospital appointments, and also GP appointments. I don't know about you, Dan, but I don't get ferried to appointments on the taxpayer in taxis. But a lot of the taxi companies, the drivers, they don't want to do it because they put their feet on the seats and they're very impolite. And yeah, so it is a scandal, isn't it?
Was so important because we've obviously had Epping as what I describe as the ground zero of this national uprising. I always knew it would be Essex. Lois, my mum is an Essex girl.
His mum's an Essex girl. That's why we get on.
And I knew it would be the people of Essex who would actually end up doing this. And they did. But I thought what you did was really important because you're saying this isn't just in Epping. Look at what's going on in all of these hotels. Look at the impact on the community. And actually, why not ask these questions? Why not ask why we can't know who is inside these hotels? At the end of the day, this is a people's uprising.
It is.
It has been peaceful, but I think something really important has happened over the past 4 weeks, Lois. And you're going to say, well, of course you're going to say this, Dan, because you're no longer in the mainstream media. But what has happened is that there are now full-on movements being created by citizen journalists.
You're right.
And independent media outlets, because no one in the mainstream media, Lois, and by the way, I include GB News and Talk TV, were covering this story until the citizen journalists were on the ground, revealing what was going on, showing how the police were shipping the Antifa protesters in. And all of a sudden, this story, after the High Court ruling yesterday, was almost legitimized. Finally, the British Bashing Corporation, Woke ITV, Sly News, after a summer of ignoring this story, studiously ignoring it, they would do anything not to run with the story, Lois. Every single night, they were putting Gaza on for 15 minutes or Jeffrey Epstein on for 15 minutes. All of a sudden, they had to acknowledge this story that they had ignored for the past 2 months had been legitimized.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
Which really brings us back, doesn't it, to what I regard, and Dan, I'm sure will have a view on this, the key thing in the early history of the 21st century is Elon Musk's decision to walk into the headquarters of Twitter with that kitchen sink and say, I'm going to turn this into a free marketplace of ideas. Because that, Dan, isn't it, is exactly the moment at which there's a plurality. Because up to that point, we forget, social media was essentially the medium for oppression. The reason that it can be used like this, the reason that dissent can be expressed, is Musk. In other words, it's the American tradition of freedom of speech, the absolutist tradition that we were talking about at the beginning, that is coming even without direct political intervention, as J.D. Vance and whatever have made, is actually coming to our rescue. It's enabling people. The reason that the groups, the ladies, wonderful ladies in pink, you and I should be really very much supporting. The ladies in pink. You're not quite, you should have been pink.
Do you know what? Do you know Dr. Starkey said that I look like a female Marlon Brando in this hat? And I think that's probably the best compliment ever.
Can you imagine a high-powered motorbike? It would have been wonderful. But it is the fact that Musk liberated social media.
He did.
And you, Dan, and I, we owe the fact that we survived our cancellations to that.
100%. And David,
100%.
It's totally changed all the other social media platforms. So the only reason that we can do what we're doing now, I mean, I love your YouTube channel, David, but to be honest, we probably would have been demonetized or banned from even YouTube.
Totally. And isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful? They've just sacked Nick Clegg. They've just sacked Nick Clegg from Meta.
Yes.
I learned he was being paid $50 million a year.
Oh.
Nick Clegg?
Nick, useless Lib Dem, even worse than Ed David Clegg.
Can I just make the point? It says on the screen, migrant hotels in Southport. That should say Southend. So someone's going to get
Come on, get it right. Southend, come on. It's Southend.
It's Southend.
Having to teach you, you're forgetting your roots.
I know. Well, actually, and this might sound like an oxymoron or a contradiction in terms.
You won't be let back.
But I'm actually considered posh in Essex.
I'm sure.
An educated Essex girl. Who would have thunk it? So thank you so much, Dan, for coming on. You've been an absolute superstar. I can say it now. My superstar panel. I can copy you. Don't mind.
You two have to come back to my superstar panel soon. Okay?
We'd love to, wouldn't we, Dr. Starkey?
Of course,
we would. Yeah, we're we're the dynamic duo. So anyway, thank you so much, Dan.
It was a lovely show.
Okay, bye. And I'm going to sort that dinner out with the big man. Okay, I'm going to do it. Okay, bye. Thank you, Dan Wootton. He's always been so lovely to me. you know, obviously we don't agree on some things.
No.
He says some
Well, then we
fruity
we
things about...
shouldn't agree on everything.
No,
There's this terrible notion that if you've a tiny error of disagreement with somebody, you know, you've got to hate them, you've got to use foul language about
absolutely.
them. This is preposterous. Again, it's one of the most terrible changes.
It's actually a very female thing, that.
And it's terrible changes in my lifetime. I mean, we're talking about 80. I was the 80th
can't
birthday,
believe you're 80.
a little bit earlier this year, of one of my closest friends and associates in Tudor history, Chris Haig, who is a wild Labour supporter. And I had to sit there for his birthday listening to tell us all how wonderful Harold Wilson was. I smiled. I applauded because that was Chris, and he has to put up with me saying the exact opposite, and he does, and he smiles and he applauds, and that's proper friendship.
Is he involved with Hever Castle as well?
No. He's now in exile in Australia. But he was the great expert on the early history of the Reformation.
Oh, really?
The Reformation in Lancashire and so on. Really, really very, very serious, very impressive scholar, very distinguished academic career at Oxford. But you know, I just cited, not to boast or anything, but just to give an illustration that people diametrically opposed politically can still enjoy friendship. And if we're to, and again, we've got to go back to that. If you can only have a politics of debate if you actually respect the other side. And it's the great problem with the left, because it thinks it monopolizes virtue.
Yes, that's
so
right.
it attributes evil to disagreement. And I am not especially sensitive about language or anything else, as I've demonstrated earlier in this program. But you look at the language that the left, and particularly...
But they're supposed to be the nice people.
But particularly the women on the left.
Oh, I know.
It's
foul. I don't get on with many women.
It's foul, it's vile.
Yeah, they are, yeah.
And it's contemptuous and it's dismissive. And we cannot have a civilized democratic society if we continue going down they're not so much rabbit holes, they're actually trenches. It's become a kind, politics has become...
Entrenched,
literally entrenched. It's become a trenched warfare.
In this segment of the show, I'd like to talk about you. Which is my second favourite topic, actually, after myself.
Me?
Let's talk about you, Dr. Starkey.
I'm called David, for God's sake.
I know, but I've been reading and watching you since I was half my life. So you have to keep on reminding me to say David. Yeah, it feels weird. It's like suddenly calling my mum Sue. Anyway. I will.
Well, that's a modern thing to do, isn't it?
It's very disrespectful, that actually. Yeah. But I will get used to it eventually. So. How did you get into television?
Oh, haven't I told you the story? It's a very good one. 1977. That tells you how ancient I am.
It was 4 years before I was born.
And there was a young man called Charles Kitchen.
Okay.
He was one of my students at Cambridge. And he was supposed to join the RAF. And you knew he was going to join the RAF because he wore what was called a Pratt rag. You know? And there was a vague sense of the Battle of Britain about him and all the rest of it. Anyway, he did, saying he was paid by the RAF on a scholarship at Cambridge.
Right.
He then leaves Cambridge with, has to be said, not a brilliant degree, joins the RAF, and then discovers... Forgive me, obviously Charles, he's now dead, alas, his ghost is haunting my throat. He then discovers that you were expected to be sober when you flew a plane.
Jesus, really?
I mean, you know, really.
I could never fly a plane.
It took him 10 minutes to decide the RAF wasn't for him. So he joined Granada, which was then the principal independent television company. And his first job was as a researcher for a program called Behave Yourself, which was, it was fun. Does the name Russell Hart...
That's what my man says to me.
You obviously got the point. All about misbehaving. Does the name Russell Harty mean anything to you?
It does, actually.
I think Dan Wootton is the modern Russell Harty.
Yeah,
so you get the general flavour of Russell. Anyway, the programme was shocking, really. It was getting a group of real live people from a Coronation Street in Oldham into studio, drunk, and getting them to talk about work and sex and clothes and sex and housing and sex.
I tried to get you drunk before the show.
And sex and sex. Anyway, and he was, in other words, it's the first piece of reality TV done on British television. But to make it respectable, believe it or not, we had an expert panel to
Okay.
comment on them,
Yeah.
rather like anthropologists viewing this strange working
Well, these
class
strange
life.
working
The
class people.
working class people. You know, how do you account for that? Anyway, we had a very serious team. There was Nick Humphrey, the great animal behaviourist, who was director of the museum.
So you were on the panel?
Let me explain and finish. I'll come to it
Sorry?
in just 1 second. We had a Harley Street psychiatrist, and they wanted a historian,
Right.
and it was Charles's job to find a historian.
Right.
And he said impossible, blah, 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 blah. And finally, the director, John Slater, very physical man, grabbed him by, those days people wore jackets, grabbed him by the lapels, pushed him against the wall, like the fuck. And you know, you have read history at Cambridge, there must be somebody.
Yeah.
And finally, the words are extorted from Charles, which was the foundation of my entire television career. Well, I suppose Starkey was the least boring. So we've had accolade of being the least boring
The least
historian.
boring
The least boring
historian.
historian in Cambridge. I was propelled into television. And
Wow.
from that...
So that
which
was in 1977.
was an extraordinary programme. And then the next one that really made my name was the, forgive me, the trial of Richard III.
Okay.
When I was paired with this extraordinary evil QC who was representing...
Evil? That's a strong word.
Well, he was, well, you know, playing evil.
Oh,
Richard
right.
Ducan, who looked... You know, that
sounds like an evil name.
They stooped, this great beaked nose, the gown like that. And Nancy Banks Smith in The Guardian, because The Guardian was worth reading then. Very, very... This is a very long time ago. Nancy Banks Smith described it like something out of the Jungle Book with Ducan as the rattlesnake and me as the little mongoose, Ricky Tikki Tavi.
Are you a mongoose? So
I was a mongoose. And you know what all my friends said, Lois? They said, well, you remember, a mongoose is just a rat with attitude. I think I've been a rat with attitude pretty well ever since.
Oh, well, I mean, is it true that rats attack people when they're sleeping? Or is that an urban
I have no
myth?
idea.
No,
but you do watch a mongoose with a rattlesnake, and you can see, or a cobra or whatever.
Yeah.
You can see the extraordinary this tiny little animal, but with the vicious teeth,
Yeah.
going for its neck.
Yeah.
It's quite extraordinary performance. That was a brilliant
Are you
piece of
gonna go for my
criticism.
neck?
But you see, what I've always tried to do, why I appear on this sort of show, I'm fascinated. I mean, what I then did, you know, I was a high-powered academic historian. I demolished the existing theories of Tudor history and whatever. I'm a financial historian, all really heavyweight stuff. But it seemed to me that unless history turned out of its shell, turned out from being locked in academic discourse and addressed people, but actually made things interesting, exciting, but used the same standards of evidence. In other words,
but interesting.
but making it communicable, important, significant. And I've always seen that as, you know, it sounds very pompous to talk about a mission, but I've seen that as what I've tried
Well, it
to
worked
do.
with me. I mean, you've been, but I only met you in the last year or so, 2 years. But you've been one of the most significant people in my life in terms of communicating history to me. I mean, I was always passionately interested, but you took it up.
Because again, you see, if I look back at how history was on television when we started doing this, there were things like, I'm really sorry, there were things like, what was it called? Time Watch.
Okay.
And it was like a really bad-tempered version of Newsnight. You got 4 historians, all of whom hated each other.
Yeah.
Because my alas now dead friend, another interesting lad, South London boy, Kevin Sharp, described a collective noun of historians as a malice of historians. So you had a malice of historians in the television studio, all shouting at each other.
Right, okay.
Saying,
and that's Time Watch.
Like Time Watch. Yeah. This view of this topic is absolutely shocking and disgraceful. You have ignored so-and-so's thesis. But nobody had the faintest idea what they were talking about. So you did a discussion about what X meant without actually telling people what X was. And so what, again, although I disagree radically with Starmer on almost everything, what we did together was reinvent...
I love Simon Sharma, but he's got no shoulders.
There are many other things he lacks. But the important thing is we reinvented narrative history. We invented history as what it should be.
And use dramatisation as well.
That I think was sometimes less successful, but the important
thing. Did you bring
is,
that in? Was that you?
Partly. I mean, I didn't much like the way it was done. I think the one that we did it where it was most successful was in The Six Wives of Henry VIII, when we used the static figures of representing the changing ages of the Queen.
Yeah.
And we had a most wonderful cameraman who was able to film them. They didn't say anything.
Right. No, they mustn't say anything.
But he filmed them in a way in which they somehow seemed to participate in the action.
Okay.
He was extraordinary. But the important thing is, what we did, we made history about people.
Yeah.
And it sounds corny, but it really is true. Big issues don't happen independently.
No.
The sort of history I was taught at Cambridge was a kind of deadly landscape of abstract nouns, class, bureaucracy, military revolution, Tudor revolution, all charging across the landscape. Ideas only matter because people invent them, hold them, live for them, and die for them.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
And we are seeing now, I mean, we were talking about Trump, we're seeing with Trump what happens when a particular individual seizes a state that is absolutely, apparently unreformable and unchangeable by the scruff of the neck.
Yeah.
And we are in exactly the same condition in Britain.
Yeah.
You see a government,
it's embarrassing.
the supposed government of serious people, grown-ups. They have a majority of 160 and they can do nothing. Absolutely nothing. Inflation is going through the roof.
Well, they're doing stuff, but they're not doing stuff in our interest.
But they know themselves. Starmer knows. Rachel Reeves know they've got to start to get welfare under control. In fact, precisely because they have a majority of 160, they can't do it. And what this needs to remind us of, and a name now is hovering, which is Nigel Farage.
Yeah, well, we're going to come on to him in a second.
Likely to be our next Prime Minister. But the key thing will be what Trump had in that second term. It will be preparation, will, courage.
Yeah, no, I completely and utterly agree with you, as with most things. And we've been speaking as well about how things need to happen, hit the ground running. We've been discussing that, haven't we, about how Nigel needs to do that, and he will. Okay, this is a bit of a funny story. So just for the last segment, so Labour MP Bill Esterson.
Have you heard of him? This figure of extraordinary prominence. one of these 300 and odd figures, who dominate our news headlines, who fill our imagination. I'm sure you dream of him when you go to sleep.
Well, I do, yeah. I mean, I wake up in a puddle.
Please.
No, not dreaming about him. Anyway, so the Labour MP chairs the Energy Security and Net Zero Select Committee. This shows you, as you say, how desperate they are, to get any kind of fame whatsoever. And obviously, it's quite interesting. I didn't talk about this with Dan. Maybe I should have done. And I know you're mates with Rupert Lowe and all of that, but no one would know who they were if it wasn't for Nigel, would they? No.
Come on.
They wouldn't, would they?
We're supposed to be talking about Bill.
Okay, all right, okay. But
you're going to have enough hard work explaining who Bill Esterton is and making us actually believe that somebody as silly as this can possibly be real.
Well, like Habib and Lowe, this guy is famous because of Nigel. He chairs the Energy Security and Net Zero Select Committee. So this guy that we've never heard of has probably has a huge amount of power. He said that Nigel Farage's net zero stance, as in it's load of, we need to abolish all the net zero stuff. That's because of me, actually. I got him to do that. It would see the death of British fish and chip shops. Well, I mean, how desperate is that? The argument is that the seas will warm up and the cod will go elsewhere. I mean, most cod is imported anyway. Our emissions, even if we can... Oh,
Thanks to the rotten deal we have with the EU.
Oh, look at him. Oh, anyways, yeah, with these big fish. It's just nonsense, isn't it? The death of British fish and chip shops. I mean, that is so desperate.
First, it is desperate. I mean, I think the thing that's most striking about it is you see here politicians who realise that they've got absolutely no idea of how to talk to people.
No.
And the genius, of course, of Trump, with his often apparent madness, he nevertheless communicates. Nigel,
fabulous.
again, is a brilliant communicator.
He is.
We are seeing other politicians, like Robert Jenrick and whatever, working very hard and doing it effectively also. And often follow.
Have you seen his wife? She's a lot older than him, isn't she?
A little older. She's a very striking woman, almost as striking as you are.
Don't compare me to his wife. Jesus.
She
looks like his grandmother.
But she dresses she dresses magnificently, and
she wears flat shoes. I don't like that.
And she holds herself splendidly.
All right. Okay.
No. She knows what she's doing with clothes, and she's got the money to do it, like you. So it's done stylishly. But
I'm just very well looked after.
But we're diverting. What is clear here? Talking about fish and chips and trying to tie this this idiot idea of climate change, which, by the way, is finally the responsibility of the Conservative Party.
Yes, it
the
is.
woman who enacts is Theresa May in 2015, who legislates for net zero by 2050, which is the reason the courts intervene to stop drilling and to North Sea drilling and on-land fracking and so on. But all of this, of course, is up there. It's abstract. And what you can see people like Esterton doing is, by talking about fish and chips, they're trying somehow to communicate these silly ideas with the general public. But of course, they're failing. There's a degree of crassness, of silliness about it.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether
they don't have a clue, do they?
They've not a clue.
No.
I mean, there's at the moment this extraordinary business. Downing Street is recruiting at enormous costs people to film and do online stuff on Keir Starmer. And do you know what the brief is? Summon your wits together. Hero takes. Takes. We've got to show Starmer in a hero. Can you imagine Starmer in a? Can you imagine taking that dredge of language? I mean, Starmer and the English language is, like the famous business of a monkey typing Shakespeare. Except if Starmer were typing Shakespeare, he would never actually do it. The monkey might by the pure process of time.
The monkey, the minky.
But the idea. The madness that somebody of this terminal tedium can be made exciting. But you see, I fundamentally blame the whole world of Alistair Campbell. This idea that you can actually put lipstick on a pig. It's still a pig.
Yeah.
And this is the problem. This ludicrous overemphasis and vast expenditure on government comms, on the whole language of optics. What does it look like?
He just looks like a wimp,
rather than dealing with actual policy.
No, you're absolutely right.
And I think, again, it's something that's going to be tremendously important in what we both hope is going to be a radically different kind of government from 2029 at the very furthest, in which will be a government that actually dares to speak frankly to people and deliberately uses a language which people can understand.
Yeah, as
I tried to do with my TV.
Well, you don't try to do it. You've amazing, you're a legend, absolute legend. I'm absolutely delighted to have you on the show. So, will you come back?
Of course, providing I get my champagne.
No, I tried to get us a nice bottle of red.
I think I prefer my champagne for this stage of the evening.
Better.
It gives an extra fizz.
I said to my son, who's helping to produce the show, he's a producer at TalkSport in his normal job. I said, get a decent bottle of champagne, and he did. So anyway, so huge thanks to my in-studio guest, the brilliant Dr. David Starkey, CBE, for your razor-sharp insights on everything from free speech victories to the Ukraine talks. And Dan Wootton, thank you so much for joining me on the Southend Migrant Hotel story. If you've any thoughts, hit us up on social media, share and like to your heart's content. Join us at the same time next Wednesday for more unfiltered debate, where I will have Andrew Bridgen, the former MP, a slightly controversial character, in the studio, and I will have none other than the chairman of the National Jewish Assembly, who has very different views to Andrew on Israel, coming down the line. Many thanks to the Heartland Institute, Q's TV, and to Fior, who are the biggest selling stockings and tights on Amazon.uk. I'm probably the only woman on television sponsored by a Trump-affiliated think tank and an underwear company. But there you go. See you next week.
You bridged the gap.
I bridged the gap.
Bridged the gap.
Thank you so much. Mwah. See you next week.